All right, everybody, welcome back to Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason. So today's project, working on Matt's K10, trying to get this LS swap finished up for him. And my goal today is to get this wiring harness and this wiring harness back into the truck, merged together, and bring me one step closer to getting this thing completed. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of routing. We're gonna do a little bit of figuring out as well, so come along with me and we'll get this job done. All right, everybody, so if you've been following this project, you know that it's a 6-liter LQ4 engine attached to a 4L80E automatic transmission using the factory NP208 transfer case. All the accessories are stock to the engine. We do not have any air conditioning in this truck. Matt says he does think he will add it later down the road. So I'm going to leave the wiring for the air conditioning in the harness. What harness are we using? We're using the factory harness. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the factory harness from the 2006 Sierra Denali that this engine came out of. As you already saw, I reworked the transmission plug to run the 4L80 transmission, including adding an input speed sensor that transmission requires. Now we need to get it back on here. The nice thing about a factory harness is they have a pretty good memory, so they'll more or less just put themselves back onto the engine once you get them into position. And the trick to that is you have to get the harness lifted and bunched up. Well, let me show you. So I like to get my PCM connector and my fuse panel connector in my right hand. Get everything else gathered in my left. Make sure you don't scratch your paint. And then you just go no, it doesn't work like that, guys. It's it's gonna take me a little bit. It's not exciting to watch, but I'm just gonna route everything back exactly how it was in the original truck. All the securement points that the factory put on there, I'm gonna reuse. I'm just gonna put it back. Like, it came off of this engine, I'm just putting it back on this engine exactly how it was before. So I'll bring you back when it's done, and we'll move along with this and getting the other harness back in the truck and getting everything hooked up so it'll work.
Later.
Well, I've got the harness all back onto the engine, transmission, and got everything hooked up, right? So alternator, ignition coils, injectors, evap solenoid, even though we're not going to use that, NOx sensors, oxygen sensors, mass airflow, like everything. It's all hooked back up. The next thing that I'll need to do is get my PCM connected and mounted, get my tack module and throttle paddle mounted and connected, and then we'll work on getting our powers and grounds hooked up where they need to be, our communication wire for the OBD2 connector, and that will pretty much be it. Then we'll have to tidy it all up, make it all look nice and clean, which fortunately, like all the stuff on the engine, that's factory stuff, so it's already pretty tidy and looks pretty clean. So making progress. I did also get the air intake put on. So for the air intake, this is the factory air intake from the donor truck. Mass airflow sensor and all still in it, didn't change anything. I did put a new air filter in it, and I just used the factory air box tray out of the donor truck as well. And all I did was weld it to the battery tray that was here, that was holding the battery when Matt brought the truck to me. This side fortunately wasn't all torn and pulled out like the other side, so no worries there. It's mounted up nice and firm. It looks very factory, I think. We're still drawing some air from the fender over on this side, so I think that'll work really well. It gives me my mass airflow and intake air temperature sensors where I need them, and gets it all. I mean, it makes the engine bay look nice and tidy, I think. It looks very much like, I mean, like this engine was here from GM, I think. Everything's all tucked up, wrapped away neatly on this side. And we do have the engine cover and mounting bracket for the top here as well, but I won't put those on until after I've started it up and had it running for a while, just to make sure I don't have any issues underneath of there and needed to take it back off. So, moving right along on this thing. I'm excited about it. It's looking good. It's coming along well. All right, everybody. So I'm outside. I'm working on this truck again. I'm trying to get the truck harness connected to my fuse panel and relay pack. My wife generously offered to handle the kids for a little while I'm out here trying to do this in the daylight and I can see, which I really appreciate, so thank you. But I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what these wires are. So in these Squarebody trucks, you have two large red wires that come into your firewall pass-through here. These both need to get battery positive voltage. Doesn't matter how you connect them, but ultimately they need to be connected to the positive terminal of the battery. Then we have a small pink wire. Now this small pink wire, this is, I'm not sure if this is the correct term, but this is interrupted ignition power. And what that means is when the key is in the on position, it will have power. But when the key is in the start position, it will not have power. So you can use this to run things like to power up a relay for some lights, or if you wanted to have some other accessory that you only want to work when the key is in the on position, that's what this one is good for. Our other pink wire, which is a little larger, now this is our uninterrupted ignition power. This is the one we want to use to control our three relays for the fuel pump, the ignition power, and the this is the one we want to use to control the switched power sources to the PCM and the engine. So the fuel injectors, the ignition coils, the PCM itself has a couple switched power sources. We want to make sure that this wire is controlling the relay that feeds all of those power sources. And then we've also got a large purple. This large purple is the starter exciter. So we're just going to use this to control our starter relay in our relay panel. Now, in these Squarebody trucks, it is a heavy enough wire and a heavy enough switch. You could just run this right down to your starter exciter post on the starter, and it would work just fine. But that would have meant integrating this one wire into my truck harness, and it just wouldn't have looked as clean. So I'm going to run this wire to my relay pack to control the relay, which will then control everything running through the factory truck harness. We've got a couple other wires over here. We've got a grayish wire. This is the it's the field wire for the old alternator. Basically, it's what tells the alternator, hey, we're on, we need to be charging, etc. We don't need this wire. We've got some pink and blue. If I recall correctly, these went to These were part of the air conditioning system. Or no, not air conditioning. I can't remember. I can't remember what these went to, but I can remember we don't need them for what we're doing. We've got a dark green here. This is the coolant temp wire. If you're going to be using your factory gauges, you'll want to get this hooked back up to a coolant temperature sensor. We are not using factory gauges. I'm going to cover that here in a video coming up. And then we've got this is kind of a tan beige wire. This is our factory oil pressure sensor, which we also are not going to be using this time. I know earlier in the series I got the oil pressure sensor hooked up, or I guess not hooked up, but installed on the engine. Not long after that, Matt and I talked. Matt has decided to go with some Dakota digital gauges in this, and the way we're doing it, those gauges are going to read the oil pressure and the coolant temperature sensor directly from the computer. So we're not going to use those wires this time. But yeah, so I guess that brings me to the point of how am I going to give these wires battery power? And I think the cleanest way to do it is going to be route them over here to my fender well. And I actually have a factory junction block. They're typically mounted up here on the firewall. I'm going to mount it over here and use that along with, man, I've got just a mess of wire in here, the factory power tap from the factory battery cable. So I'll be able to get this to one side, and then the other side I'll put my wires on. And that'll give us our nice power distribution block to run our battery positives off of, and we can also run some additional feeds for our relay control sides. So we're getting there. We're getting there, guys. It's getting real close. I'm gonna just start getting some stuff done, and then I'll bring you back and show you what it all looks like. All right, team, so it's actually the next day now. My wife is hanging with the kids again. Thank you, sweetheart. So I can try to get this thing done. We're so close. So I'm working on the wiring. I've got my relay panel mostly wired in here. I've got my basically everything for the truck harness connected. And what I'm about to do next is connect everything from the truck. I should say, I've got everything to the donor truck to the LS harness connected up now. And what I need to do next is get everything from the truck harness connected up. So I've got my purple here, which will be the starter exciter. I'm just going to wire that to the control side of the starter relay. I've got my uninterrupted ignition power here. That's going to control my two ignition relays. And I've got my fuel pump power wire, which is going to go to the load side of my fuel pump relay. I'll get those hooked in. Then I need to get all my ground wires here and get them grounded. And I'm just going to mount these. The box itself is going to mount right here to this fender, which is grounded to the body, obviously. So I'll be able to ground right through the mounting tab for my ground. And then I'll hook up my powers, my main power feeds here, right to my power distribution block right here. And that'll give me essentially a working wire harness and relay. Now, one thing on the LS platform, when they have a torque converter with lockup in them, which to my knowledge all LS engines came with a torque converter with lockup, is they need a signal for when you hit the brake pedal to unlock the torque converter. And the way that signal comes is there's a wire. It's actually this purple wire here. I can't remember which pin it goes to in the PCM, but it goes to a pin in the PCM connector. I think it's pin 46 in the green connector, now that I think about it. It goes to pin 46 in the green connector, and it is supplied with voltage, battery voltage, all the time. When you hit the brake pedal, when you touch the brakes, it stops supplying that 12 volts to it and tells the computer, hey, they touch the brakes, unlock the torque converter clutch. So because this truck, fortunately, originally had a 700 R4 transmission that also had a lockup torque converter, it already had that signal wire, 12 volts when you're not pressing the pedal and 0 volts when you release the pedal or when you press the pedal. So I'm able to use that to connect and provide that input for the PCM. So I'm going to finish getting everything wired up here. I also have my communication wire for the PCM and my malfunction indicator light wire from the PCM. I'll get those wired inside to the OBD connector, and I'll cover that in a little more depth when I get there. You really only need 4 wires to that OBD connector. Actually 3 wires to the OBD connector, and the mill light is going to go to our gauge cluster. But yeah, I'm going to finish getting everything wired up, and then I'll bring you back, show you. It should all work. And then it'll be time to get it all tidied up and looking nice. Well, team, I've been hard at it. This is now the 3rd day. Not full days, you know, I'm getting a couple hours a day. Come out here and work on this wiring, and I'm getting really close. So I've got my relay and fuse panel here. I haven't mounted it yet. I'm not going to mount it until I'm sure that everything's working the way it should be. I got my wiring all tidied up. Oh, I missed one. I do need to get some looming on this red wiring here, but that's okay for now. I've got what I need to go through the firewall, and I've got everything else running back over here to the engine like it should be. This is my throttle pedal harness. That'll go through the firewall. Got my PCM connectors. I haven't determined exactly where I'm going to mount the PCM yet. And I also have my ground battery control module connector, so I'll need to get that over to the ground battery control module. And my little power distribution block down here. So got everything tied up, wired up. So once I make these last couple connections and finish running these last few wires, I should be able to fill this thing with fluids and give it a test start. But yeah, I just wanted to give you an update. It's super hot out here, so I'm going to go get out of the sun for a little while, cool off, and I think that's it. I'll bring you back on the next update. Well, team, I've been out here grinding, working, and I've got my wiring all secured over here. Now, don't pay attention to the throttle pedal or the tack module. I got to get those in the cab and get them mounted. And I need to get my PCM brackets are supposed to be here today so I can get it mounted. But otherwise, my little fuse and relay panel is mounted nice and securely here. That's ready to go. And I've double checked all the fluids. All the fluids are full. I think everything's ready. My battery's nice and charged. I'm gonna see if this thing will start. I still have to run the wiring for the electric fans, but I need a pick-me-up. I need some kind of yes moment to just carry me through to the finish line on this project. So I'm gonna see if it'll start. I don't have gauges in it yet, but yeah, let's do it. There's fuel pump. Hey, hey! There we go. Got a little hunting idle. Oh, now now it's smoothed out. Oh, actually, the PCM probably needs to relearn this throttle body and the idle adjustment, because this is not the original PCM to this engine. But hey, look at it go! Oh, that's a good feeling. When you finally get to start it, and it's running right, and there's no bad noises, that's always a good feeling. So, alright. Should shut off also. Yep, perfect. Woohoo! Now, that isn't the same as a driving test, but that's going to be another video. That's it for this video. It's probably already really long. I'm going to have to try to condense it as much as I can. But it starts, it idles, it runs. I'll button up the last few things I need to get buttoned up in order to be able to take it for a test drive. Obviously, I got to get the tack module mounted. I got to get the throttle pedal mounted. And I got to get all the gauges put in. And the gauges are going to be, they may be their own video because that's a separate little, it's kind of like an add-on project to this. But that's awesome. Man, it's been a long time coming to get this thing started. And it finally started. Woohoo! Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this helps if you're doing a swap. And until the next video, take care.